Let me tell you something. Storms are not signs of God's absence. They are often the evidence of his invitation. You see, life was never designed to be lived without difficulty. Trouble is not a stranger. It's a companion of purpose. And the mistake most people make is thinking they have to escape trouble before they can experience God. But hear me, God does not wait for the fire to go out before he shows up. He steps into the fire. Ask the 3 Hebrew boys. They didn't meet God before the furnace. They met him in it. Why? Because sometimes God waits for the heat to rise so you can finally recognize that your strength was never enough. It is in that moment when your wisdom runs dry, your friends fall silent, and your options evaporate, that God says, now I can step in. You see, difficulty doesn't destroy destiny, it reveals it. Trouble is a test site for divine intervention. The question is not whether God is willing to help. You need to ask yourself, have I invited him in? Because God does not force his way into your situation. He waits for an invitation. And until you acknowledge that your intellect, your education, your resources, and your contacts are not enough, you keep wrestling with things that only the presence of God can fix. Some of you are praying for God to deliver you from the difficulty, but he wants to join you in it. So, what do you do when the pressure is rising, when everything is falling apart? When you're out of strength, out of options, and out of words. Difficulty is not proof that God has left you. It may be the very place he's waiting to meet you. You have to understand that God is not allergic to trouble. He's not intimidated by pressure. He's not offended by your pain. God steps into difficulty because that's where his glory shines the brightest. The Bible says in Psalm 46:1, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Not just a help, a very present help. That means he is more present when you're in trouble, not less. The problem is, we often try to fight our battles alone. We think that faith means pretending we're okay, keeping our heads up, smiling through the storm. But what if faith isn't about acting strong? What if real faith is knowing where to run when you're weak? What if the trial you're facing right now is not a punishment, but an opportunity to invite God in? Think about this. When you walk into a dark room, you don't scream at the darkness. You don't argue with the shadows. You simply flip the switch. Why? Because light doesn't struggle with darkness. Light displaces it. That's what inviting God into your difficulty does. It doesn't mean the situation instantly disappears, but his presence changes how the darkness behaves. When God enters a situation, what overwhelmed you loses its power over you. Now let's be honest. Have you ever been in a situation where you tried everything? You tried fixing it, talking through it, pushing harder, thinking deeper, and nothing worked? That's not failure. That's a divine setup. Because it's in that moment when human strength comes to an end that God begins to reveal himself as more than an idea, more than a Sunday message. He becomes your survival, your breath, your breakthrough. Let me ask you a question. What have you been facing alone that you were never meant to handle by yourself? What pain, what pressure, what fear have you tried to bury under your own effort while God stands waiting for the invitation? There's a story I heard about a little girl trying to move a big stone in her backyard. Her father stood watching as she struggled, pushed and pulled with all her might. Finally, frustrated and teary-eyed, she said, "Daddy, I've tried everything and it won't move." He looked at her and said, "No, baby, you haven't tried everything. You haven't asked me." How many of us are in the same position? Fighting with things, stressing over burdens, struggling with impossible weight, and all the while the Father is waiting for one thing: an invitation. God doesn't show up where he is not welcome. That's not weakness. That's honor. He's given you the power of choice. He's given you authority over your space, your mind, your heart. But when you surrender, when you say, "God, I can't carry this alone," you open the door for his power to be made perfect in your weakness. So, the next time the pressure builds and you feel overwhelmed, don't just ask, "How do I get out of this?" Ask, "Who do I need to let into this?" Because the issue may not be the size of your problem, but the absence of the one who can handle it. You see, difficulty doesn't destroy destiny, it reveals it. Trouble is not the enemy of your purpose, it's often the doorway to it. But here's what I've noticed. Most people pray for breakthrough, but run from the very situations that produce it. We want elevation without pressure. We want growth without stretching. And we want miracles without a mess. But the truth is, God uses difficulty like a furnace, not to burn you, but to reveal what's been inside you all along. Have you ever looked at gold in its raw form? It doesn't shine. It doesn't sparkle. It looks like a dusty, worthless rock. But when you place that same rock in fire, something amazing happens. The impurities melt, and what's valuable starts to rise. That's what pressure does. That's what difficulty does. It forces everything that's been hiding to come to the surface. Your potential, your strength, your endurance, your resilience, it's all in you. But it takes fire to bring it out. Now, let me ask you something. What if the thing you've been asking God to remove is the very thing he's using to refine you? What if the discomfort isn't the enemy, but the evidence that you're being prepared for something greater? We often say we want to fulfill our calling, but we forget that calling always comes with crushing. Jesus was called to save the world, but Gethsemane came before the resurrection. Their garden was a place of pressure, of sorrow, of pain, and yet it was also the place where purpose was confirmed. Look at the olive. You don't get oil from it by admiring it. You get oil by crushing it. Crushing doesn't reduce its value, it releases it. And that's exactly how God works. He doesn't send difficulty to destroy you, but to release what you didn't know you carried. Some of the greatest leaders, the most powerful voices, the strongest believers you know, they were not made on a mountaintop. They were shaped in the valley. They didn't become wise in comfort. They became wise in the fire. Because it's in the furnace that your character is tested, your faith is proven, and your vision becomes clear. Remember what Romans 5:3-4 says. We glory in tribulations also, knowing that tribulation worketh patience, and patience experience, and experience hope. In other words, trouble produces transformation. It's not just something you go through, it's something that grows you. But here's the danger. When we resist the pressure, we delay the process. When we try to escape too soon, we rob ourselves of the strength we were supposed to gain. You don't build muscle by sitting on the couch. You build it by pushing against resistance. And the same is true spiritually. You build spiritual strength by enduring What's trying to break you? Not in your own power, but by allowing God to work through you. So let me ask you this. What is God trying to reveal in you through this pressure? What strength is he unlocking? What leadership is he pulling out? What maturity is he cultivating? Maybe you're praying for comfort, but God is more interested in your capacity. He knows what's inside you. He placed it there, but he also knows it won't surface until the heat is turned out. And don't think that because it's hard, it's not holy. Sometimes the most sacred moments come wrapped in difficulty. Think about Joseph, betrayed by his brothers, falsely accused, thrown in prison. Everything looked like a setback, but it was actually a setup. The pressure didn't stop his purpose. It prepared him for it. And when the time came, he was ready. Not because life was easy, but because he stayed faithful in the fire. So the next time pressure shows up, instead of asking God to take it away, ask him to show you what it's producing. The question is not whether God is willing to help. You need to ask yourself, have I invited him in? Because God does not force his way into your situation. He waits for an invitation. You see, many people live as if God is an emergency responder, someone to call when things get out of control. And even then, we treat him like a last resort. But the truth is, God wants to be included from the beginning, not summoned at the breaking point. He wants partnership, not just panic-driven prayers. Let me paint a picture. Imagine you're building a house, and the architect is standing right next to you, blueprints in hand, ready to guide every decision. But instead of listening, you push forward on your own, laying bricks where windows should go, putting doors where walls should be. At first, everything might seem okay, but eventually the structure starts to crack. Water seeps in, doors won't close, and the foundation shifts. And only then do you turn to the architect and say, can you fix this? That's how many of us treat God. We make plans, pursue dreams, enter relationships, take on responsibilities, and then when everything starts to collapse, we finally turn to him. But here's the key. God doesn't want to be your fixer. He wants to be your foundation. He wants to be included in the planning, the building, the decisions, and the process, not just the crisis. There's a powerful principle in Revelation 3:20. It says, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in. This is God speaking, not just to sinners, but to his people. And what is he doing? He's knocking. That means he's close, but he's waiting. Not because he's powerless, but because he honors your invitation. This is a question you must ask yourself. Have I opened the door? Have I really invited him into the decision-making, into the conversation, into the pain? Or have I simply informed him of what I've already chosen to do? Sometimes we say God is in control, but our actions say, I've got this. And that contradiction leaves us frustrated. We can't experience peace when we're still carrying the weight we refuse to surrender. We can't walk in divine wisdom while leaning on our own understanding. And we can't expect God to fight battles that we never gave to him in the first place. Let me give you a real-life analogy. Think of your life like a car. Most people want God in the vehicle, but they keep him in the passenger seat, or worse, the back seat. We ask him to ride along, but we keep our hands on the wheel. But when the road gets rough, when the fog rolls in and the brakes stop working, we cry out, Jesus, take the wheel. And God, in his mercy, does. But how much smoother would the ride have been if he had been driving from the start? So here's the challenge. Don't just include God in your crisis. Include him in your choices. Don't wait until the burden breaks you to invite him in. He wants to guide you, guard you, and grow you, but he will not force his way in. He's standing at the door. Yes, even now, but he will only enter where he is welcomed. Ask yourself, what area of my life have I kept off limits to God? What decisions have I made without his counsel? Because the truth is, your breakthrough doesn't begin when the problem disappears. It begins when God is given permission to enter the problem. Some of you are praying for God to deliver you from the difficulty, but he wants to join you in it. There's a difference between deliverance and presence, a difference that changes everything. Deliverance is about getting out. Presence is about getting through. And sometimes the breakthrough you're desperate for is not in escape, but in endurance, with God right beside you. Think about the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace. They were thrown into a burning fire for refusing to worship an idol, a situation designed to destroy them. But here's the incredible truth. They didn't meet God after the fire. They met him in the fire. The fourth figure who appeared with them wasn't just a comforting presence. He was divine assurance that God was with them through their trial. Their deliverance was an instant removal from the fire. It was the sustaining power of God within the fire. Many people pray, Lord, take me out of this. But what if God's plan is not to take you out, but to walk with you through the fire? What if the fire is the classroom, and the lessons you need to learn are found in the flames? How many of us have missed the real blessing by wishing for escape instead of embracing God's presence? Imagine you're in a storm at sea. You can't calm the waves, but you can have the captain on board with you. Someone who knows the waters. Someone whose presence steadies the boat, even as the storm rages. Would you rather be alone, hoping the storm ends quickly, or would you rather have the captain in the boat, guiding you through the chaos? The Bible tells us in Isaiah 43:2, when you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers, they shall not overflow you. Notice, it doesn't say the waters won't come. It says God will be with you when they come. The promise is an absence of trouble, but the presence of God within trouble. But what does it mean to invite God into your difficulties? It means inviting him to be your strength when you feel weak. It means opening your heart to his peace when anxiety surrounds you. It means choosing to believe that his presence can change the atmosphere of your struggle, even if the struggle itself doesn't immediately change. Let me ask you, are you willing to allow God in your situation, even if the situation stays the same for a while? Are you ready to experience the peace that surpasses understanding in the middle of chaos? Or are you waiting for the storm to stop before you acknowledge him? There's a powerful lesson in Paul's story. He was beaten, shipwrecked, imprisoned, and persecuted, yet he said, I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. Philippians 4:12-13. Paul didn't pray for trouble to vanish. He relied on God's strength within the trouble. What about you? Is your faith strong enough to trust God with your difficulty, not just for your deliverance? Sometimes the greatest victories happen not when the situation changes, but when your relationship with God deepens in the situation. Think about the most challenging moments you faced. Was there a time you felt God's presence, even in the pain? Those moments are glimpses of the reality that God doesn't just rescue you from trouble, he rescues you in trouble. So the next time you find yourself overwhelmed, don't rush to push God away until the storm passes. Instead, open the door wide and say, Lord, come in. I need you here. Because his presence is not just a comfort. It is your strength, your shield, your peace, and your hope. You know, some of the most powerful moments in life come not when we feel strong and in control, but when we admit that we are weak and need help. It takes courage to say, I can't do this alone. Yet that admission opens the door for a power far greater than anything we could muster on our own. There's a deep biblical truth in Paul Corinthians 12:9, where God says to Paul, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Notice that power is made perfect in weakness, not in strength, not in independence, but in weakness. When you admit your weakness, you invite God's strength to fill the space. Many people want God's help, but they resist showing their need. They want to appear strong, capable, and self-sufficient. But the very thing we hide, the weakness, the fear, the struggle, is the very thing God uses as a channel for his power. It's like a cracked clay pot. The cracks are not flaws to be hidden, but openings through which light and life can shine. Let me ask you, what cracks have you been trying to cover up? What parts of your life have you been pretending don't need God's touch? Because here's the thing. God's strength isn't just a boost to what you already have. It's a new source of power that comes when you give up trying to do it alone. Imagine a power plant supplying electricity to a city. No matter how much wiring you have, if the connection to the power source is weak or missing, the city will experience blackouts. Your strength is like the wiring. Important, but useless without connection to the source. God is the power source. When you connect to him in your weakness, suddenly energy flows, lights come on, and everything begins to work again. The Bible is full of stories where God uses people's weaknesses to display his glory. Moses was slow of speech. David was the youngest and smallest of his brothers. Peter denied Jesus 3 times, but each one became a powerful instrument because they acknowledged their limits and leaned into God's limitless power. Have you noticed that sometimes the greatest breakthroughs come not from what you can do, but from what you can't? Because when you can't, you stop depending on yourself and start depending on God. And when God steps in, miracles happen. Ask yourself this. Are you willing to let go of your pride and admit you need God? Are you ready to say, Lord, I don't have the answers or the strength, but I trust you? Because that surrender is the key that unlocks divine power. There's a beautiful paradox here. Society tells us to be strong, independent, and self-made. But spiritual truth says that true strength is found in surrender, true leadership comes through service, and true power is made perfect in weakness. When you allow God to fill your weakness, you become a channel of his strength and grace that can transform your situation. So don't fight your weakness or try to hide it. Instead, invite God into it. Say, Lord, here is my weakness. Take it and use it, because his power isn't just about changing circumstances. It's about changing you from the inside out. And when you experience that power, you realize that your greatest moments aren't when you felt most in control, but when you felt most dependent on him. As we come to the close of this message, remember this. Life's difficulties are not roadblocks meant to stop you, but invitations for God to move in and show his power. When you choose to invite him into your struggles, when you open the door and let his presence walk with you, you're stepping into a new level of strength, peace, and purpose. Don't wait for the storm to pass to seek him. Invite him into the fire, the pressure, the uncertainty, and watch how your story changes. Thank you for opening your heart to this truth today. May you walk forward with courage, knowing that you are never alone in your trials. Good luck as you invite God into every difficulty, and may his presence transform every challenge into a testimony of victory.